Now the freak out started, not freak out, but the like bubbly, nerdy joy when I was going to be, fitted for my Starfleet uniform, or I was being walked to my bridge and I got to sit in my captain's chair for the first time. And those were the moments where like I had to kind of bifurcate and go, all right, 6-year-old Todd, you have a blast, but a grown-up ass Todd has to do a job today.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Todd Stashwick is an actor. He sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work. Is there a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character?
Obviously, the first step in all of it is reading the script to kind of zero in on the vision of the writer, and then obviously the director and producers chose the script. So, all right, I need to grok the job at hand. And when you're reading the script, you want to read if there's a breakdown of the character, where have they come from? Everything every other character says about this character, because there's who the character thinks he is, and then there's also how he is perceived. And then, in a meta sense, what is their function in the story? What is their piece of the puzzle in order to tell this story? So it's a fact-finding mission. And then after that, if it's a fact-finding mission, going, okay, well, maybe I need to learn about military protocol, or I have to learn how to ride a horse, or that would be the next step, is going, all right, well, now what's my research based on this, so that you bring, authenticity to the role and inspiration.
I know you're a writer. Were you always a writer when you were professionally acting?
Well, my first true professional acting gig came part and parcel with writing, because it was with the Second City, Chicago. Right. And we were already part of the job outside of improvisation. Part of the job was to write sketches. And so I was doing a lot of sketch writing. Based on our improvisations, we would get inspiration from the audience, and then we would improvise a sketch, and then that would give you kind of the structure. And then you might go back and actually commit pen to paper to shape it and to pull out the best versions of it, and to give it something that is, because there's a purely improvised scene can be very successful in and of its own right, but part of the success of that scene is often the fact that it is happening in front of the audience in real time. That exact scene might not be repeatable because it's not under the same conditions.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have this kind of filter to which it's being viewed. And so you go, well, if we tried to do it verbatim, word for word again, it's not going to have that same exact sense of discovery with an audience. So what you want to do is you want to take those scenes and then you want to shape them and rewrite them. So I started writing, I want to say early on, 92 or 3. Yeah.
Is that muscle that you are exercising there as a writer somehow also helping your acting muscle? You know what I mean? Because you're talking about your place in the story and how this matters. And can you talk about that a little bit? Like just the idea of every time you, like even in little roles where you're sizing up your character's function in this story, just being a writer helping that.
Yeah, and I also think it goes the other way too. Like being an actor helps my writing as far as music of dialogue and understanding that. I mean, it's all heightened reality anyway. It's all a presentational artifice. So when people say it's very realistic, I'm like, is it? I mean, we don't really talk the way actors talk or characters and stories talk. But back to your question, I'll give you an example of understanding writing structure and your position in the story. I will use, say, Will and Grace. the famous sitcom Will and Grace, or Seinfeld. Structurally, the quote unquote sanest, most grounded performers are at the center. You got Will and you have Grace. They have to be as I have to say, have to have the heaviest feet. So they have to be the most grounded. And then the function in the story, there's sort of an expanding circle of clown from there. And the further you get away from Will and Grace, the broader the performances can be, because they are not the main ingredient. So you get Jack and Karen, who gets to be much broader in a commedia dell'arte sense, or a broader performance. And same with like Jerry and Elaine, they're the most grounded. And then you get to George, and he's a little broader. And then you get to Kramer, and he is just classic buffoonery. And so understanding when I'm reading a script, if it's for a half-hour sitcom, I sort of look at the circle and go, all right, what's the dial of performance that I have to turn here in order to serve the style, genre, and tone of the project that I'm doing? So, for instance, I have played a great deal of villains in my life. Villains are further from the center of the structure of the show. So you'd have your cops, who are the grounded center, and then the villains get to paint with a broader brush the difference between Batman and the Joker. Like you get to paint it affects your performance style and your choices. You are probably given a lot more leeway to be more outlandish, bigger in your performance style.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to carry the story. And the same goes in reverse. The closer you are to the center, the less silly, I guess, or the less broad, or the less presentational at times you can be.
You were just saying, you played a lot of villains, and you often talk about your resting villain face.
I've used the phrase, yes.
But you've also done a lot of comedy. I mean, you started out in comedy, and it's so interesting when you see a career like this with a lot of work where you're going on both sides of it. Yeah. I imagine somebody might think, okay, my brand is comedy. I have to stay in that lane.
Yeah.
You didn't, and you made a success out of that. Was there just a point where you're just like, I don't want to keep doing this, or is like, I know I could do more?
I had this conversation with, I was working on a show called The Riches, and I was working with Eddie Izzard, and they said, in order to move faster through one's career, you could pick a lane. You could do comedy or drama. And then once you've reached a level of success, you then can experiment into one or the other. It's probably easier to go from comedy into drama, but it goes both ways. I did not take that advice from Eddie because that's not where I found joy. I think I found joy in the fact that I could spin both of those plates. I could 1 month do Dharma and Greg, and then the next month be working on Criminal Intent with Vincent D'Onofrio. Like, I loved it just keeps it all interesting. And I liked being the guy who could bring very grounded, interesting stuff into my comedy, and then peppering in my comedy into my more dramatic work. So it's like when I was in college, you would do Sam Shepard, and then you would do Moliere, and then you would do Neil Simon. Like, well, you're doing it all.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to keep doing it all. And fortunately, they kept letting me.
Right. Well, this brings up the question then, for someone who's worked so much and on so many different lanes, like we're talking about here, you must have mastered the art of auditioning. It must have happened. Like, so what is the secret?
Yeah.
You do have a thing you do, right?
I have a thing I do. yeah, through the years, I have sort of honed. We always talk. I studied extensively with an acting teacher in Los Angeles, Leslie Kahn, and she's really good at helping an actor find their essence. And I think being able to find your essence doesn't mean that you're always playing yourself, but you're bringing. It's like the difference between Frank Sinatra singing Fly Me to the Moon or Stevie Wonder singing Fly Me to the Moon.
Yeah.
They're going to bring their thing, even though they didn't write the song and the notes are predetermined and the song asks certain things of you, but Sinatra will do it his way, and then Stevie Wonder will do it his way, and then you want to go, okay, well, what am I in the mood for? And so that's one part of it. I think I have kind of honed in on my essence, and all I am is, three weasels in a trench coat standing on each other's shoulders. Like I'm just a stack of my influences. Like I watch my work, I'm like, yep, stole that from Tom Hanks. Yep, there's a little Chris Walken there. Oh, now he's doing Bill Murray. Like I'm just a sad thief. But the next question, as far as auditioning goes, I think what I really worked on was becoming a student of the medium, so I could go, okay, I'm auditioning for a procedural, a hour-long cop show. But what kind of hour-long cop show? Is it The Wire or is it CSI? Because those are two different kinds of acting styles. In the same way, going back to saying Moliere is an acting style and Sam Shepard is an acting style. And so they each require different tools from the actor's tool belt and a different dial of intensity, performance, and this. And so I think if I can toot my own horn, I think what I got really good at was being able to turn the dial of what project I was auditioning for and then delivering it. Because growing up a kid who was a mimic and an imitator and all of this, I could kind of hone in and go, okay, auditioning for Will and Grace is different than auditioning for Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yes. Both half-hour sitcoms, but completely different styles of acting. And I think I made a point of really trying to crack the nut of the kind of show that I was auditioning for.
This is really interesting. Yeah, it just feels like it's almost like you're hitting a frequency, right? And when you hit that frequency, then the people relax behind the table and they're like, oh, this guy gets it. He's on.
He understands what we're doing on this show.
Yeah. I really think that that's really all it is. Like everyone's scared. Like you're scared, of course, going in an audition. I don't know if you are. I mean, I'm just saying actors are. So
nervous. Certainly want to do a good job.
Yeah. But I think that they're nervous behind the table because they're trying to find somebody and they're nervous about, like, they just want to trust someone. I think, and if you could find the trust.
And especially with guest star work, right?
Right.
Guest star work, you don't want to bag into the furniture. You just want to go up, show up, and hit your mark, and keep their day moving because they don't have to work on you. They know that corner is taken care of.
Well, speaking of guest star work, have you also just gotten that down in terms of being the new kid in school for that one day and that idea of being on a set?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've done, I mean, as far as series regular work, I have only done I was on The Riches and then 12 Monkeys. So that was like, for the next couple of years, I know the job, right? I'm just showing up and doing the same character and that. But the majority of acting and the majority of actors in Los Angeles, our bread and butter is guest star work, because those cycle through more often, and every week they need new characters to populate around the series regulars. And so I've done, nice long chunks of recurring roles on shows, but I would say my bread and butter has been an episode, 2 episodes here and there on many, 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 many different shows. So yeah, the idea of I need to come in, I need to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, that I'm going to have a good time. I am not going to be upsetting the apple cart. I'm going to make my choices, which they know what I'm going to be doing based on my audition. They know what I'm bringing to the table. So I don't have to keep re-auditioning it.
Right.
I come in and I do what I showed them I'm going to do. If they want to change it, that's what a director's there for, to amend the performance. And I don't have to, so it's just do not get in the way of this moving train. Like, jump on and jump off, because there's going to be another you here next week.
But are there things that you kind of need in order to do your best work, on these things, or
information?
Yeah,
it's a little frustrating in this day and age, because we live in because of social media, there is a currency in spoilers. And so that forces the producers to hold a lot of their content really close to their vest.
Interesting.
So I will get auditions. It's like 4-page scene, no script. And maybe the scene isn't even maybe it's from a different project. So you go, look, I need to have as much information as I can, and you are in the exact opposite business right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that part can get very frustrating. So I often have to sleuth stuff out, and I have to go, look, if I'm auditioning for X TV show, and I spend a lot of my career in shows that are genre TV shows, whether it's action, adventure, horror, science fiction, fantasy, that kind of thing. And those are the projects that tend to be the most protected under NDAs, and you get the least amount of information. But I'm a huge nerd, as you can see.
Yeah.
And I can usually go, okay, I know who this character is.
Yeah.
If I'm reading for, say, Gotham, I'm like, oh, okay, yep, I know who he is in the Gotham universe, in the DC universe. So that at least gives me, or I'll just flat out go, look, you need to tell me, am I playing this guy? Because it's going to affect my choices and my background and the decisions that I make. And if you're holding it all away from me, you're just not going to get my best work. I've been on sets where the pages of the script are coming to you daily. Like, you've never been given a complete draft.
Right.
To know everything that's happening. I mean, sometimes you're only just given your scene.
Yeah.
And then you go, I don't know how this fits into the bigger tapestry.
Yeah.
But you do the best you can, and I also then I think, quote, having a style or a vibe about you, knowing your essence, that can sometimes go a very long way. Because you go, well, if they're not going to give me information, and they hired me, then they want a bit of the Stashwick show, so I will give them that.
You always have the Stashwick show to present to them.
Meaning,
I know what you mean.
If they're not giving me information, I have to at least have to pretend like I have it. So I will give them my version of what, as much as I think this is, and so they'll get
and let them tell you if it's wrong, right? And then you change it.
Yeah, and then you change it. Yeah.
So you must have, being a nerd, you must have flipped out when they're offering you Picard.
Yeah, it was a slower, quieter process than that. I just did this other interview, and they said, "What was the audition like for Picard?" And I said, 4 seasons of 12 Monkeys.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually audition for Picard. Terry Metalis came to me and the summer of 2021 and said, we have a character for you on Star Trek Picard that we're writing for you. And of course, my response, as I've said before, is I can't wait to see who gets to play it, because that never actually comes true in this day and age.
That's a good one.
But thank you for thinking of me. He's like, no. We've been calling him Captain Stashwick in the writer's room.
Wow.
Because going back to what we were saying, he's like, Terry knows my voice. He knows what I'm bringing to the party. And so they were plugging that tone already into their writing.
Right.
And lo and behold, like a month later, the paperwork cleared and I was showing up to the set. Now the freak out started. Not freak out, but the bubbly, nerdy joy when I was going to be, fitted for my Starfleet uniform, or I was being walked to my bridge and I got to sit in my captain's chair for the first time.
Yeah.
And those were the moments where like I had to kind of bifurcate and go, all right, 6-year-old Todd, you have a blast, but a grown-up ass Todd has to do a job today. And so it was never intimidating. I was never overwhelmed by it. I was never like nervous to meet my heroes. What's funny is it's all contextual. So when I'm brought to set to work with Patrick Stewart, I'm brought to set to work with a fellow actor who's very accomplished and has a very storied past, and I don't know, been knighted by the Queen. So there's a lot of gravitas there, but we have a script. We know what we're saying to each other. I know my choices. I know what effect I have to have on his character or I'm trying to have. So we're just grown-ups acting together. In a different context, though, and this is the story I'm going to tell. I was shooting a film in New Mexico with Ewan McGregor, another person whose career I've followed and enjoyed, but we're like, oh, we have a day off. Let's go into town in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Now we're in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it was Ewan and this actor Boyd Holbrook and myself, and we're in this country western clothing shop because they wanted to buy shirts. I don't know, and I'm standing there waiting around. Just waiting for them to come out of the changing room. And around the corner walks Katie Sackhoff, who also was in town working on something. But I'm a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. And I was like, oh, shit. Starbucks here. And my brain was like, Obi-Wan, we got to get out of here because Starbucks here. I was feeling super nerdy. Because in the wild, I don't know what to say to this person that I want to talk to them. Now, if I had met Katie on set as a coworker,
that's different.
Well, then we sort of meet on equal grounds and equal footing, and I could express to them, and I've gotten the chance to do this with a lot of people whose work I love that I work with. Well, like I get to just, you know what? I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'm really geeked about working with you, and I want to hear all the stories. And we all love telling stories about other jobs that we've done. So, yeah, it's all context. So the fact that I stepped onto the Star Trek set, I'd also had worked with Frakes before, and Terry was there, and they had primed the pump for me, and it was really warm. I wasn't intimidated. I knew who this character that I was going to be playing was. And so it just immediately, and they were so warm, it just felt like home immediately.
It's amazing. Playing a captain, do you have to add that stature to your persona somehow? Do you know what I mean? Like, is this something you think about?
Well, I have to, sort of relate it to my own personal, like you do your research, you sort of go, okay, what is Starfleet? What does it mean? What is rank? What are all the positions on the bridge? What is port and starboard and aft and all of those, like wanting to understand, okay, where is the engine room? Like I want to know my job. Great. But as far as playing the gravitas of a captain, a leader or whatever, well, I have 2 children. I know what it's like to have to be in a position where, one of them's older now, but, where my opinion is important and you need to follow my orders and do what I say. Hey, because I'm trying to keep you safe.
Yes.
I'm trying to keep you alive. And that's very much what Captain Shaw, his goal is, out in the final frontier. We are here to stay alive because space wants to kill us. Yeah. It just does. Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about that a lot. Space does not want you alive. And so here we are in a can hurtling at warp speed into uncharted regions, undiscovered countries. So his primary goal is to make sure that everybody stays alive, and Shaw particularly clings to protocol and he clings to procedure because those structures are in place to keep people alive and safe and be able to do our jobs while staying alive, because you can't do your job if you're dead. So I do know, I just had to go as far as being like, what's a father do? A father has to look out for his children. And so that's as much of a captain as I've ever been. And I've been a teacher, and I've been the head of groups and stuff like that. So it's like, to take high status in a room, I know what that means.
Because you work so much, because you are saying, and there's evidence of this because we can see your work, that you kind of have a way of doing this now, and it's successful. This is a little different than, let's just say, like a brain surgeon who's got, 1,000 brains he's operated on. He doesn't need to shake things up, right? Yeah. He can just do it. He knows how to do it, and he does it. An actor kind of has to keep things fresh somehow.
Sure.
How do you do that? Do you ever find yourself kind of hitting things perfectly, making everyone happy? That's great. But for you yourself, needing to kind of keep that thing alive that you use?
Well, first of all, if we're lucky enough, the scripts help that, because with Picard, I'm on it for the duration, right? And so the story evolves, and so the characters' motivations evolve. What's interesting is doing a lot of half-hour sitcom. Those characters, by definition, don't change really.
Right.
You're serving up. It's comfort food, right? And so the Jack that you met from Sean Hayes in season 1 is the same exact Jack in the last season. Their circumstances might alter. He may move in with him and blah, 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 blah. But they're still the same guy, and we want them to be the same. When you're doing drama, whether that's horror, sci-fi, fantasy, procedural, cop show, more serialized television, the characters have arcs, big arcs. And if you take 12 Monkeys, for instance, the Deacon from season 1 is not at all the Deacon from season 4. I mean, there's much of, there's things about them that are carried forward, but who they are, what they're doing and whatnot is often what keeps it fresh. The growth and cracking the nut of the scene and cracking the nut of the emotional arc of this character, that always is fresh and interesting. I've also been lucky that I've gotten to play a ton of different characters, so that's always fresh. And going back to your initial question of getting to do, Dharma and Greg, but then going to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like, that's fresh. Like, it's like, now I'm buried in shark demon makeup, and now I'm with Jenna Elfman. Like, these are vastly different experiences and vastly different applications of my skill set.
Yeah. What do you do when you're not working to kind of keep your inner actor creatively happy? Dungeons
and Dragons. I play a lot of D&D.
It's such a great thing. Every actor should be doing D&D.
It's the best. And I played it when I was, 11. I stopped for a big chunk because I thought the devil was going to eat me. I was a victim of the satanic panic, and then, then I outgrew that silly notion and came back to it over 5 years ago, and now I play it relentlessly. What I like about it as a writer is because I dungeon master as well as play as a character. I was
going to ask you if you do that, yeah.
I DM, and so I'm creating story all the time that I don't have to get network notes from, that I don't have to submit for approval. I basically cook a meal, and then I serve it, and then I watch people make it better. So that's a treat. It used to be I would have an improv school or I would do improvised shows, and so that was it. D&D, I don't have to sell tickets to. I just have to invite 6 people.
But are you really selective on those 6 people, though?
Well, I have a couple ongoing games with the same group, and then I do what are called one-shots, where I invite different people who've never played together, maybe never played. I invite them to sit around the table for just one evening. It'll go from 4 till 10, and we have order pizza, we pour bourbon, and we roll dice and kill monsters. And it is, as my friend Matthew Lillard says, it's the best way to spend a life.
It's also just, it's amazing because when I think about my most creative time, it really was in my early teens, making these movies without a camera with my friends, role playing in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we really invested in those stories.
Yep.
And it's still feeding me today, I think.
It informs, and it's play. One of my favorite philosophers is Alan Watts. And Alan talks about how the meaning of life is essentially playful. Like, that is why we are here, to celebrate consciousness. I mean, we feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and shelter ourselves so that we can celebrate being alive, whether that means you like to go running marathons, or whether you like to tap dance, or whether you do needlepoint or collect beer cans. Like, we play, we live to play. We don't work to live. What does he say? He says, life is a dance. It's not a journey. It's a piece of music. And so it's not destination bound. It's like, you're not playing the song so that you can finish it. You're playing it to live in it and to celebrate all the notes. And so I do not see Dungeons and Dragons. It's like almost like I do everything else so that I can play D&D. And so that I can gather with friends and raise a glass and go on this fantastic adventure. And it's the same reason that I do Star Trek, even though that one happens to pay me. But it's so I can gather with people, because I think story is fundamental.
Todd Stashwick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.